Hello, this is Professor Neil Hamilton from the Drake University Agricultural Law Center with today's installment of our project, Law for Landowners, 10 Things You Should Know. The topic today is 10 things landowners should know about working on a local watershed project. As you all know, the issue of water quality has taken on a much greater importance in our state and nation in recent years. And one of the most promising tools to deal with water quality issues is working at the watershed level. A watershed is a geographic area that's defined by the land that drains in to a particular body of water. That could be a lake or a river or a stretch of a stream. And watersheds come in all shapes and sizes. They can be as large as the Mississippi River watershed that drains into the Gulf, or it may be as small as the land on your farm that drains into a farm pond. The important point to recognize is that we all live in a watershed. In fact, we live in a set of watersheds. Well, watersheds are classified by government officials using what's known as a hydrologic unit code, or HUC. And so you'll oftentimes hear the abbreviation HUC. So a HUC 8 watershed is a large-scale watershed, such as the 2 million acres that drain into the North Raccoon River here in Iowa. And a HUC 12 is the smaller of the unit codes, and this is for a smaller unit, for example, a stretch of a river or stream. Iowa has 1,600 HUC 12 watersheds, which means that they each average around 20,000 acres, but it means that they're a much more manageable and local version of a watershed. So here are the 10 points for landowners to think about working in a local watershed project. Well, the first point is knowing which watershed you're in. Everyone's property is in a HUC 12 watershed. And by finding out what watershed you're in, knowing its boundaries, then you can begin to think about what it is that your land does in terms of its contribution to water quality. We all have an idea where the water goes when it flows off our property, and we have a pretty good idea where the water comes from that may drain onto us. But learning about the actual boundaries of a HUC 12 can be an interesting process. The second point is how you can identify what HUC 12 watershed your land is located in. Well, the good news is that there are a number of resources available on the internet to help you do this. Perhaps the most valuable is a website that's maintained by the U.S. Geological Survey, or the USGS, under the link Science in Your Watershed. And there you'll find a tab for identifying your HUC 12 watershed. So this interactive map will allow you to drill down, find your property, and then find the boundaries of the HUC 12 watershed that you're located in. And this may surprise you a little bit because unlike the boundaries of political districts, such as counties or school districts, which are fairly arbitrary straight lines, the boundaries of a HUC 12 watershed are determined by geography and topography and the lay of the land. And so you may discover properties that you really didn't realize were somehow connected to you, but you all share a common drainage. The third point in thinking about a local watershed project is visiting with other landowners who live in your watershed. Since the lands that are adjacent to you are going to be in your watershed, you already know some of these people. They may be your friends and neighbors. But by visiting with other people in your watershed, you can find out what their level of interest might be about watershed projects, and also discover whether or not there may have already been discussions going on about the opportunity for some type of locally created watershed project. By identifying your HUC 12 watershed, you'll also be able to identify what political jurisdictions you're located in. This brings us to the fourth point, which is visiting with the local soil and water conservation officials to see what they may be doing when it comes to watershed projects. All of the land in Iowa is located in a county soil and water conservation district, and while Huck 12 watersheds may cross county lines, the soil and water conservation districts are a good starting point for finding out what may be underway when it comes to a watershed project. Similarly, you want to visit with the officials from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources or the Iowa Department of Agricultural Land Stewardship, which have watershed initiatives, as well as the regional RC&D, or the Resources Conservation District. They may be working at the watershed level as well. The conversations that you have with these officials may help identify for you whether or not there is an existing watershed project underway, and if there isn't, what it may take to get one started. The fifth point to keep in mind is the idea of inventorying the water quality needs of the watershed. So once you've identified the boundaries of the Huck 12 watershed in which you live, you'll also be able to have a good idea of what are the water resources there, what streams or rivers are there, or what lakes are there. You'll be able to identify, for example, whether any of those waters have been listed by the state as being impaired. You can identify whether there are any cities and towns. Are there public water supplies that are taken from those waters? Are there businesses or industries that may have water treatment programs? By thinking about the water resources and then thinking about what the water quality is, you can come up with some idea of what are the needs and the opportunities that may be available for trying to address water quality in your watershed. This will be important when you're trying to identify, well, what are the types of plans and practices that we should consider implementing. The sixth point to consider is the need to begin the water quality conversation. If in visiting with your neighbors or with local officials, you find out that there aren't any water quality projects underway, or that no one has thought about developing a local watershed initiative, this may well be your opportunity to provide the leadership that helps bring one into existence. Iowa is only going to be able to address our water quality situation if all landowners all across the state become involved. There's not a Huck 12 watershed in Iowa that couldn't benefit from having some type of well-planned and carried out strategy to try to improve water quality. So, as a landowner, this is your opportunity to think about what you can help others in your watershed do for improving water quality. Well, this brings us to a seventh important point, and that is inventorying the water-related assets that may already exist in your watershed. We've been dealing with soil and water conservation in our state for generations. And this means that we've spent millions of dollars installing soil conservation and water management practices. You think of the miles of terraces, the buffer strips, the grass waterways, and the other practices that have been funded. All of these contribute to helping manage water quality. The ponds and the small water impoundments that have been created are part of this water quality and watershed infrastructure. By helping identify what has already been achieved, you'll have a better idea of what opportunities may be present going forward and what you have to build on. The eighth point in thinking about a local watershed project is identifying the tools and resources and programs that may be available to you. As I noted, officials across the state who are concerned about water quality are looking at using watersheds as a method for organizing and delivering on water quality improvement projects. This means that IDALs and IDNR and even the NRCS have funds that they are helping put towards organizing and implementing watershed-based programs. This support might be in the form of planning and organizing. It could be assistance for practices such as cover crops and putting in buffer strips. But the key is talk to the officials who are involved in water quality efforts and identify what may well be available to help you and your interested neighbors in developing a watershed project. The ninth point is to learn from the experience of others. There are any number of exciting watershed-based projects underway in the state of Iowa. The IDOLs and IDNR have demonstration projects in which they're working with landowners and farmers and watersheds across the state to try to show what can be done when local people get together, organize, and develop a plan and seek out the funds and the support to implement a series of practices. So, by looking at the experience of these watersheds and finding the information such as what you could find on IDOL's and IDNR's website about them can give you an idea of what may be possible in your own watershed. There's no reason to start from scratch because there are a lot of lessons that have been learned and lots of great experiences that can be replicated across our state. Well, this brings me to the 10th and final point, and that is the opportunity for landowners to join together to create a plan and to go about putting in practice. If we're going to make headway dealing with Iowa's water quality issues and water management issues, such as the flooding that we face, it's going to take the cooperation and coordination of landowners and watersheds all across the state. If you've gone through this process of identifying your watershed, talking to your neighbors, finding out what's going on or what may be available, you're now at the point where you can actually move forward. So by joining with others who are interested, developing a plan, coming up with priorities for the steps you're going to implement, you'll be able to develop a project that will be measurable and identifiable, and one that'll bring you great satisfaction as you're able to observe the improvements that you and your neighbors are able to make by working in your local watershed. Well, this has been Professor Neil Hamilton from the Drake University Agricultural Law Center with another installment in our series, Law for Landowners, 10 Things You Should Know. Today, the subject was 10 things to know about working in a local watershed. Thank you.